Turkey's prime minister reshuffles his cabinet after a corruption investigation rattles his government. He insists the probe is politically motivated and backed by international interests. Caught in a scandal and with elections on the horizon, Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his party are in a fight for their political lives. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Darine Abougaida. It's a wide-ranging corruption scandal that's engulfed the highest levels of the Turkish government. And now, Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has replaced 10 cabinet ministers after the 3 who were implicated in corruption resigned. Erdogan had long ago announced the cabinet was due for a reshuffle, but it hasn't stopped talk of a deepening crisis at the heart of the government, one that Erdogan is failing to control. Well, of the 3 ministers to quit, this man right there, he's the Environment Minister, Erdogan Bayraktar, and he has the potential to hurt the Prime Minister the most. Despite being Erdogan's longtime ally, he refused to go quietly, saying the Prime Minister should follow suit. But the Prime Minister insists his government is clean and dismissed the corruption allegations as part of a conspiracy.
The reason our party has been successful, the reason we took the helm and we've been ruling the country for 11 years is because of our honesty, our commitment to the country and our determination to fight against corruption. The AK party does not overlook nor tolerate corruption. Should it do that, it would be removing its raison d'etre. We are facing an attack against the Turkish people and the Turkish Republic, which is presented as a corruption probe. Everybody is aware that this is not a corruption probe, but it's an obvious conspiracy, a setup against Turkish politics and its people.
But that message didn't satisfy a lot of people in Istanbul. Instead, they held protests in parts of the city and they were met with tear gas and water cannon when riot police tried to disperse the crowds. Let's bring in our guests to discuss this. In Istanbul, we have Yavuz Baydar. He's a columnist with today's Zaman, Turkey's English language newspaper. Also in Istanbul is Ozgur Unluzarshikli. He's the Ankara office director of the German Marshall Fund. And in Ankara, Galip Dalay. He's a researcher at the SETA Foundation in Turkey. Thanks very much for being with us on Inside Story, gentlemen. Ozgur, over to you first. In this cabinet reshuffle we saw after the resignation of 3 senior government ministers, does this ease some pressure off Erdogan and the allegations of corruption that are surrounding him and his party?
It doesn't ease the pressure for 2 reasons. First of all, it came a little bit late. If the resignations had come just after the probe started, they would have been more meaningful. And second, there's an impression among the society that actually what we have seen is the tip of the iceberg, and people think that there is more to the story.
Galip, I suppose we should make clear that the cabinet reshuffle, in fact, had been a long time coming and was announced before this whole scandal did break out. But let me ask you about the Environment Minister who resigned, and with his resignation, calling for Recep Tayyip Erdogan to step down himself. How much pressure does that add on Erdogan, and could this be one of the first calls of many to come for his resignation?
Well, I mean, yesterday he uttered some strong words, but today he also backtracked on these words. He said that, he has been friends with Erdogan for 40 years. Therefore, he will remain he will remain serving this party and this movement in other capacity. So therefore, that didn't create a big pressure within the party. But for the time being, we don't know whether there will be some more resignation. It might be a few more, but I personally don't expect to be a big number.
Yavuz, the newspaper that you write for, Zaman, must be keeping a very close eye on these allegations of corruption going on. We understand there are 3 different investigations, allegations of corruption that include money laundering, include bribery, gold smuggling as well. I mean, is the issue of corruption being addressed properly by Erdogan?
The public perception obviously is important, and at the end of the day, I think the public perception will not be positive in Erdogan's favor, because first of all, the files, the three-pronged investigation is about more than $100 million. Second, it involves his 4 ministers. They have resigned now, but they're still at the issue. And the main question, of course, is that the tip of the iceberg? Do we have to see more? Is more coming? What is it? What's happening what happened on the local level in various cities, not only in Istanbul? So these questions, if we look at the past 8 days of performance of Erdogan, have not been addressed properly.
Let me ask you, Yavuz,
you
talk about him not addressing properly. Have you seen Erdogan defend the minister's innocence at all from your coverage?
Well, there wasn't really a defense of the ministers per se. That was done rather promptly, quickly, and the resignations was issued by the official Gazette this morning. And the Gazette also said that one of the ministers, who had yesterday protested in a manner that he asked for the resignation of Prime Minister as well, was taken from duty, not had resigned. So this is an issue also that needs to be addressed. The reshuffle includes this portion, which I think the entire public will focus on, rather than the ordinary reshuffle that was expected. The overshadowing of this corruption case, and also there's a second corruption case which is underway, which has been blocked by a row between the prosecutors and the police. And altogether, I think will cast a very thick, dense shadow over the the coming weeks up until the local elections.
We're going to certainly talk about not only the local elections, but the presidential elections a little later on. But Ozgur, if I can ask you, why do you think that the 3 different investigations, the 3 different operations were all sort of carried out on the same day and announced on the same day?
Well, I could only speculate about this because there is no public information about why they are bundled together. But what we understand is there has been this investigation going on for 2 years. So there are 2 years of accumulated evidences. And it might be the case that the people who were carrying out the probe have seen that there were linkages between these 3 cases that today look separate to us.
Galip, what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, here we come to the political aspect of this corruption case. So, I mean, for sure there is the judicial aspect of this corruption case, and it should go as far as it go, and it should it should not make any discrimination about anyone in any positions. No matter at what position a person is, if he's found guilty of corruption, he should bear the consequences. He should totally bear the consequences. But this is the judicial aspect. When we talk about the bundling the 3 of these cases into one file, we come to the political aspect. Here is the part of the Gulenist movement, which is headed by the Fethullah Gulen. Gulen himself is an Islamic cleric. He's the operation against the government. This is not we should see in a context that came after the grammar schools debate, that came after the the threat of leaking the sex tapes.
Okay, so then what you're saying, right, you mentioned Gulen, and rightly so, but so what you're saying is that you agree with what Erdogan has said, that this is a target, the government is a target of an international plot?
Well, it doesn't have to be international plot. I mean, it is mainly, I mean, in my judgment, and it's not just my judgment, it's the main perception among columnists in Turkey. It's not just among the government circles. You have from the liberal circles like Rushan Çakır up until previously arrested journalists such as Ahmet Şık, Nedim Şener. None of these people sees this as a corruption case per se. They see it it's politically motivated corruption case. I mean, there is a corruption aspect to this, but the reason that it has been bundled 3 together, and the fact that it has been leaked only months before the election, is because it's politically motivated. I mean, a month ago we had this debate in Turkey about the closure of the grammar schools. And during these grammar schools, if you look at the Twitter account of people close to the Gulenist movement, you will see all this blackmailing threat about revealing of corruption cases, the sex tapes, all those kind of things. So I mean, here is when we come to the political aspect of this issue.
All right, let's just explain to our viewers exactly who Gulen is. This corruption case is seen as part of an escalating feud between the Prime Minister and Gulen, who is his former ally. That man, Fethullah is his first name, is the leader of a religious and social movement known for its network of schools in more than 140 countries. In Turkey, Gulen followers serve in institutions that include the police, the judiciary, the media, even the AK Party itself. And the party has benefited from its relationship with Gulen, who backed its members to 3 successive election victories. But the relationship didn't last, and the rift seems to stretch back to a Gulenist prosecutor who tried to question the head of Turkey's National Intelligence Agency, who is one of Erdogan's allies. And more recently, the Prime Minister's decision to shut down Gulen-run schools was seen as a provocation. Yavuz, let me ask you this. The newspaper that you write for, Zaman, is related, as I understand, to the Gulen movement. So can you tell me if there's been a response from Gulen when it comes to allegations that he's in fact behind all of this corruption, these corruption allegations and the scandal?
Well, let me make a little distinction. I think today's Zaman in English version is the people working there or writing independently from outside are much less affiliated perhaps to Gulen movement as a voluntary movement than the Turkish version. But nevertheless, the reactions, as you asked, from Fethullah Gulen was increasingly harsh in toning as the accusations from Erdogan, Prime Minister Erdogan came. So it turned into a public row at the end. There was a condemnation at the end by Fethullah Gulen about the corrupt people, intoxication of power, and how power corrupts, and they let God condemn them or in that manner. And that condemnation, that harsh condemnation, was received also as some sort of threat by Erdogan and his government. So there is clearly a row. There is clearly a very clear friction, rift between Gulen and Erdogan in person, as well as in a larger scale. Nevertheless, the evidence collected by the prosecutors since September 2012 in these three-pronged investigation was at the day of the police raids, December 17, presented privately in the morning to Prime Minister himself by the head of the Judges and Prosecutors Supreme Council, an independent judge who, according to my sources, told the Prime Minister, "We have very strong and clear evidence in this case, sir." That was the information that was given already in the early hours of the operation. So what we, I think, as media professionals from now on, as of today and tomorrow, should focus on is clearly the case. Does it hold? Does it have clear evidence? Where does it lead to? And how the government will deal with this, whatever it is, tip of the iceberg or the iceberg itself. This is the main issue that should concern the entire Turkish public.
Ozgur, let me ask you what you think Gulen, because he seems to be quite a character playing in this unfolding of the scandal. I mean, what does Gulen benefit from all of this? Because the movement, it is a movement, in fact, and not a party in Turkish politics.
Well, first of all, let me convey my thoughts about whether the Gulen movement is behind this probe. I always prefer to talk based on what I know, rather than speculating based on what I don't know. And what we all know is actually the court system, the judicial system that has initiated this probe and is proceeding this probe was actually created after the constitutional amendment in 2010, which was brought about by the ruling party itself. And actually this same judicial system tried and put into prison several people, including army generals, including professors, including members of the judiciary, etc. And I didn't hear any complaints from anyone, or I didn't hear any complaints from the ruling party at that point that the judicial system was under Gulenist influence at that point. And today, actually, we have no evidence that could tell us that the judiciary is controlled by the Gulen movement. What we also know, on the other hand, is that, as you have stated, the newspapers of the Gulen movement, intellectuals and journalists and academics affiliated with the Gulen movement, are actually very critical of the Turkish government and also the ruling party nowadays. And we can talk about a clear split between the Gulen congregation or Gulen movement or Hizmet movement, as they call themselves nowadays, and the AK party government. And what I can see is what's primary for the Gulen is this split with the AKP. And anything else seems to be secondary to the decision of splitting from the party.
Okay, so
And,
why do you think
what
that...
does the Gulen...
Right, but let me ask you why you think there's a power struggle that's going on at this particular time.
Well, there are, of course, there are different versions of the story, or there are different views to this. According to the ruling party sources, the Gulen movement wanted to share power with the AK party, and to a certain extent, the AK party shared power with the Gulen movement, but their thirst for power in the end was too much for the party. And I mean, what I have heard from someone high-ranking in the party is whatever we give them, they have asked for more. So this is the version of the AK party. The version of the Gulen movement is that actually their interests are global now rather than local. And the local political situation in Turkey is endangering their global interests. And that Turkey is actually now a detail in their power base. And if they did not distance themselves from the ruling party in Turkey, their position in other countries would be endangered. This is what I have heard from sources within the Gulen movement.
Galip, is that a valid argument, you think, that they're being endangered?
Well, I mean, I don't know in what sense they are being endangered. So, I mean, like, you know, they have schools all over the world. Like, you know, in what way, like in what sectors their interests are being endangered? For
Well,
instance,
let's
like,
put
you know,
that
the
back to
business
Ozgur.
organization.
A valid question. Let's put that back to Ozgur. What sector is Ozgur?
Well, Galip, I asked the same question, actually, and the answer was yes, they have schools in some countries in which, or with which Turkey has conflicts with, like in Egypt. Now, the Gulen movement has a school in Egypt, and we know Turkey's relations with Egypt. So, if they stay close to the ruling party in Turkey, this will endanger their situation in Egypt. Or they have schools in countries...
Well, that looks like a
shall I
very
go
weak
ahead?
argument because, like, oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
And
Please, Özgür.
they have, let's say, this is what I hear, and then they have schools in other countries around the globe whose governments are actually critical of Turkey's foreign policy.
Galip, let me ask you how influential...
Can I come inside?
Sure. I'll comment, and then I'll come back to you for a question. Go ahead.
Well, sure. Well, that looks a very weak argument because, like, we know that the Gulen movement have schools like in over 140 countries. So, I mean, like, you know, if you count the number of the countries with which Turkey has problem is, like, you know, right now, like Egypt and let's say like Syria and other more countries. So, I mean, we also know that Gulen movement in Arab countries has not a huge presence as that they do have, let's say, in Central Asia. So in this regard, and plus the relationship between Turkey and Egypt got bad only after the coup, which has been like, you know, an issue of a couple months. But the row between Gulen movement and the AK Party has been going on for a couple of years. So, I mean, this is a very weak argument, I mean, to say the least. And so that doesn't sound to be like a valid argument. Like, to me, the valid argument is that, it is, even though they have presence in, you know, all over the world, but their base is in Turkey. And, like, you know, their power in Turkey, like the level of power in Turkey does have a significant influence on their level of power in other countries.
All right, let me bring in Yavuz at this point. You're speaking about the power of the Gulen movement. Yavuz, just how powerful is the Gulen movement, and especially when you look into the Turkish situation, look ahead to the elections next year. Can they mobilize a lot of supporters and change the path of the elections?
To give you a simple response, there is strong enough reason to believe that Erdogan will maintain much of his power. At the moment, I spoke to yesterday 3 pollsters, 3 various different independent pollsters, and they all seem to agree that at the moment, if there was elections tomorrow, there would be 5 to 6 minus points perhaps for AKP.
Okay, but would Erdogan have won the previous 3 elections?
Turkey, and things
would Erdogan
change.
have won the previous 3 elections without the support of the Gulen movement?
Yes, he would, because the arithmetics in Turkish elections is that the first party and runner-up party should have, for a single party government, should have more than 8 points. And Erdogan was clearly above 8 points, CHP, main opposition party. So that kind of arithmetics doesn't cut it. But main thing is, if this erosion continues, and if Erdogan cannot take things in control, which doesn't seem to be, I think in 3 months a lot of things can happen, and there may be even more pressure from legal point of view, from law enforcement's point of view, to take action, to maybe take things more seriously and perhaps respond judiciary with respect as an independent entity, which doesn't seem to be happening right now. The more I think these attitudes in terms of going for unity of powers rather than separation of powers, which is one of the main headaches of Turkey today, disrespect for judiciary as an independent power, and putting political executive above everything, and in order to subordinate the rest, I think will backlash in the eyes of the rather wise, silent water segments of Turkey.
Özgür, do you share that view?
At the end of the day,
Özgür, do you share that view? Can Erdogan survive this?
Well, he can survive this. He's a survivor, but what I know is the future of, even the near future of Turkish politics is by no means predictable. I mean, I would not venture to talk about what Turkish politics will look like in 1 year from today.
Galip, can I ask you to perhaps venture and tell us what Turkish politics would look like? What do you think will happen with the elections of next year?
Well, I mean, certainly these cases will have impact on AK Party, on the performance of AK Party, but I do think that it will not be as bad as many predicted, because the reason for that is many people does not see this case as a clean hand operation. Many people see this as a vendetta by one group against the government. So I mean, this is a very wide perception among the people. So because of that, right now, maybe many evidence is being regarded true suspicions, not only by the government circles, but with many with a wider circles. So it might have an impact on on the performance of government. And probably I mean, the Gulen movement and people who is persuaded by those evidences might have a negative view of the government. But I personally don't expect to be a big drop in the government's election result.
And
but as
what
Özgür
about
said, I do agree. I mean, we will. It is highly unpredictable. I mean, especially 2014 will be highly unpredictable because Turkey is entering in an election period. There will be 3 elections in a row, so there will be many cases like that. I expect many cases like that to emerge as part of this the struggle between the government and the Gülenist movement.
Right, and in the last 10 seconds, Özgür, let me just ask you if you think we will continue to see protests in Istanbul as we have seen.
Well, first of all, in winter, it's not likely that there will be very big protests because the weather is too cold and protesters like warm weather. That's why we had the Arab Spring rather than the Arab winter.
Right, but we did see protests
hand,
against this corruption scandal, in fact. But we'll just have to leave it there on that note. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks to all my guests, Yavuz Baydar, Özgür Onluzar-Şikli, and Galip Dalay. And thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. You can always send us your feedback. You can email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.